Hello, everyone. Hujambo or salam. um, to whoever's watching, thank you for, or whoever's listening to this, thank you for taking the time to check this out. Um, my name is Henok. I am a 26-year-old person who grew up in Sub-Saharan Africa, um, to be specific, Ethiopia. So my topic choice today was about how meditation and in particular Vipassana meditation um, could help the population in Africa, or just could help in the different aspects of daily life in Africa. Um, just a disclaimer: this is just something I thought about, making today. So I'm not necessarily prepared, in the sense of like I might go from like one topic to another topic or to another topic. So if it feels disorganized, and if you sense that I jump around a lot, it's just my style. So sorry. um, I'm not necessarily like a certain like teacher, or um, I'm not a monk or any sort of. I don't have a religious tie to the practice of meditation. Um, I am speaking from experience. So whatever I say, just understand that it is personal opinion. Um, so there is always a certain aspect of disagreement with whatever is being said, and that's okay. And um, yeah, if you want to add something to it, or if you want to contact me or anything like that, please do so on Facebook. So just to start off, meditation. What do I mean by meditation? Because it, depending on the context, it could have different meanings. But the meditation I'm talking about is not necessarily like prayer or any practice related to Christianity or other religious sects, but rather meditation as in the practice of awareness. Um, you might have heard, mindful meditation. Just mindfulness could be another word that most people might be familiar with, but rather it's just awareness of different body sensations and different aspects of your body. So that's the meditation that I'm talking about, just to clarify. And why am I specifying this topic to just Sub-Saharan Africa? Um, because obviously Africa in itself is just so broad and diverse. But my experience as someone who grew up in Sub-Saharan Africa, um, I am speaking from my experience growing up there, spending most of my life there, 20 years. Um, I'm not too familiar with life in Northern Africa, because I understand it is different aspects of it. But meditation as a practice, as a whole, the concept of meditation, the concept of Vipassana meditation, it doesn't really matter who you are, where you live, what religion you follow, what gender, your age, anything. Just, if you're a human being who can practice, who can follow the guidelines and follow um, the practice properly, you are bound to get benefits. It doesn't matter which part of the world you're in. So it's not necessarily to discourage anyone or to say that meditation does not benefit the rest of Africa, but rather, when I speak about, like, say, certain social issues, they might be more relevant in the context of Sub-Saharan Africa. But I'm sure if you're anywhere in the world, you can relate to this video, so it shouldn't matter. So I'll jump right in. Um, Vipassana meditation, it is a practice that was taught um, taught by uh, the Gautama the Buddha. If you're familiar with the Buddha, then that is the practice or the type of meditation he used to reach final liberation. Um, there are a lot of different types of meditation. I'm not here to sort of point at others and say that's wrong or this is not right kind of thing, but rather my experience has been with Vipassana, and as a whole meditation, I understand it to be as a practice that should lead eventually, that should lead you um, to a place where there is a cessation of suffering, right? So whatever style of meditation it is, as long as you stick to it and as long as you see the changes in yourself right now and here in this world, not in an afterlife or anything, then that practice is benefiting you. So it doesn't necessarily mean a certain style of meditation or only Vipassana can achieve this. But my experience since the beginning of my practice has been with Vipassana, and that's why I'm focusing on it. But that is Vipassana. The word Vipassana means is translated as insight or seeing things as they are. What does that mean? Seeing things as they are. With the practice, eventually, you should be able to, or um, you should be able to see um, the impermanence of things and the fact that it's non-self, or it's the fact that that thing you're observing, that experience um, that thing that you're experiencing is not you. um, it is impermanent, it is bound to pass. So eventually, with the practice, with proper practice and continuous practice, um, you should be at a point. You should be at a point where outside experiences or outside factors do not necessarily affect your personal state or your current state. Meaning, attachments or aversions will cease to end. You won't be attached to anything because at the end of the day, when we look at the circumstances in our world in general, not just in Africa, what drives us is our attachments, right? People not only work for their necessities, but rather other things, their comforts and their desires, their goals, their dreams. So there is a certain element of attachment when you do something and you like the feeling it gives you, you're bound to want to do it again, even if it causes you harm, even if it causes harm to others, even if it causes harm to the planet you're living in, you will keep doing it, and you don't necessarily get satisfaction. And um, even if after you get something, your goal or anything, you set another goal and you want that feeling, or you're attached to that feeling of achieving something, or you're attached to that feeling of the status you might be getting from um, achieving that goal. So you're always doing something, you're always striving for something. And we also, our world is also uh, dependent on our aversions, or runs on our aversions, right? uh, have certain aversions. We don't like pain, so our actions, our lives are surrounded by things that cause us less pain, that cause us less discomfort, whatever the expense that might be um, coming with. So aversion attachments, seeing things as they are, eventually being at a point or reaching um, a stage in your life where um, seeing is seeing. You don't necessarily label things as good, bad. Um, you don't averse to them. You don't seek them out. Um, you just experience. You're just aware of your bodily sensations, and you're just mindless reactions. Or um, in the past you might be reacting with aversion or attachment, but now your reactions will have changed into actions, where after you're aware of that sensual, the body sense, um, that that has become a result of outside experiences. You don't necessarily just mindlessly act to its needs, but you will you will give yourself time to do what is best at at that situation. Sorry if I sound very like disorganized, like I mentioned. Is I'm just doing it very randomly and not necessarily the most prepared. Um, so how does meditation or Vipassana meditation help Africa? And what before I get to that topic, I want to also talk about why meditation hasn't necessarily um, become like a, an integral part of the African society or the Sub-Saharan African society. I will admit I'm very ignorant of the many, many cultures that exist. So if maybe there is already a culture or a traditional spiritual act that involves meditation, and the sense of what I talked about, being aware of your bodily sensations. Maybe there's already a practice in somewhere in the continent, but I'm not aware of it. But um, at least being in the West currently, and um, just being seeing the practice sort of expanding even in the West. It's not necessarily something that was a part of like a good number of people's lives like 20 years ago. It's something that keeps on uh, reaching broader audiences, and you don't necessarily see that in the continent. Yes, it is. There are centers, even in Ethiopia, there are meditation centers that exist. Uh, Even here in the U.S., yes, there are centers, many centers, but personally, I haven't had an experience where I was able to see another person from the continent, another person from Africa, or just even someone who is black or African American. It's a rare occasion to see that, but I've never met any other African at the meditation retreats that I have attended. Um, or anything like that. So why hasn't it uh, expanded in Africa like it has in other parts of the world? From my understanding, there are different factors. Um, uh, One might be that even when you have centers, even like for the Vipassana practice, there are a couple of centers in the continent that regularly give courses, like the one in South Africa, and there's another one in Kenya. But I'm sure even under other cultures of meditation or other traditions of meditation, there are other centers. But um, you don't. It's not necessarily something that um, the locals are involved in. Like, I'm sure there are locals that attend those centers or those retreats, but rather it has a larger audience of um, expats or maybe travelers who want to experience those retreats in other places. So, why is that? One factor could be economic factors. Not that those retreats or those meditation centers are expensive or anything like that. Especially in the Vipassana tradition, the 10-day courses are free. So um, I don't necessarily think people don't go to those centers because they're expensive. I'm sure there are the ones that charge, but meditation as a practice as a whole, um, it's how should I say it? It's something that people might resort to once they they reach at a point where they, to an extent, they naturally understand that their journey or their um, seeking for happiness in the material world or the world outside, it could be they were seeking, a certain level of success or a certain level of money, a certain level of this or that. But meditation might be something that naturally comes after you get something and you realize, if you're someone who is aware of those things, maybe you realize that, okay, this hasn't brought me happiness, but I've done this so many times where I looked for a goal and I thought that would bring, that would make me happy, but after I got that thing, I was still unhappy, so I'm tired of it. I need something that can bring me more of a permanent happiness, or that doesn't really depend on me jumping from one one goal to another goal, or one possession to another possession. So maybe like it's not just the case of sub-Saharan Africa, but rather even in, places like India, where you think that meditation is a part of, a lot of people's daily lives, but that's not really the fact. Um, you know, the like the Buddhist tradition came from India. The Buddha did most of his teaching there. Um, but still, um, for most people, like if your country, or if you're a part of the world, um, has most of its population still, I don't want to say struggling, but still not in an economic, um, has not achieved economic freedom to an extent, still have to work to uh, provide for your necessities, not necessarily work to, buy a car, buy this or that, but just the basic necessities, food or shelter. So for maybe that population, it might be something that's, you know, overlooked unless it's tied to your religion. It's not something you seek per se, like in a continent like in a place like sub-Saharan Africa, where Buddhism does not necessarily have a, a you know it has a history, but it doesn't necessarily have a following, or it's very insignificant. So it will have to take people actually like seeking out practices like meditation, um, to make that an integral part of daily society. So if the people are still struggling to fulfill their daily needs, their daily physical needs, um, it's hard to ask people to meditate when their children are struggling, or when they're struggling, when they're hungry, and when their physical, not luxuries, but necessities haven't been fulfilled. So maybe for that part of the world or other parts of the world, that might be a good and very valid reason why meditation hasn't necessarily um, reached to the level where uh, the West or certain parts of the Asian continents have reached. Because here in the West, like let's say in the context of the U.S., like I said, it is something that is growing, and there was a point where people didn't necessarily have the luxury um, to spend a certain amount of time, sitting down and practicing meditation. They didn't have, it's not, I don't want to say luxury, because the benefits outweigh whatever thing you might be spending your time on. But we'll still call it the luxury, but the luxury of, let's say, traveling to the East to learn the practice, to take on the practice, because that also had a lot of influence. The teachers, the students from here going there and bringing the teachers back, and just the has helped the expansion. So people don't necessarily didn't have the that privilege like 50 years ago or 60 years ago or 70 years ago. Um, so it is a newer thing, and that is what is happening in sub-Saharan Africa, or in the context of like where I'm from, let's say Ethiopia. It's not necessarily something people seek for unless they are at a certain socio-economic place where they they maybe have realized that, okay, I've gained this, like I mentioned earlier, but it hasn't brought me what I want. I'm gonna have a water break. Sorry. The second reason um, might be that, like I mentioned, even though even nations that have a, a majority of Buddhist followers, or Buddhism followers, or Buddhist people, um, it doesn't necessarily mean they all practice meditation, obviously, but religiously and culturally, both religions that have been imported, or religions that are native to the continent, um, there is a strong grip um, of religion in general. And like from my experience, let's say I grew up Orthodox Christian, an Ethiopian Orthodox Christian. So um, practices such as meditation in, its, let's say, Buddhist form, or as thought by the Buddha, um, it wasn't necessarily something you you would consider checking out, and it doesn't mean conversion. Obviously, you meditating doesn't necessarily mean you be converting to a certain religion, but practicing things, or doing things that are generally related to another religion, I felt at that time, at least, and I think that is the case, are a bit taboo. It's not necessarily something you do, like to practice things that are not within your religion, especially some things that are from, like, let's say, the East, where you know there's just this blind perception that, oh, they believe in, like the Indian gods, let's say the Hindu gods, uh, they have this many hands, so they believe in the devil, or just misconceptions of what religion or what spirituality looks like outside of what, let's say, are commonly practiced in that nation. So it's not something that you're exposed to begin with. There are a whole lot of materials talking about meditation. I'm sure that might have changed within the past 6 years I've been there. um, but within your community, even if there are materials, meditate something like meditation is, it needs practice. It's not necessarily something you read and just achieve, or it's not something you read about and you get the benefits. You have to practice it, and it takes time. So if you live in a society, and if you live in a family where um, any sort of outside practice is rejected, you're discouraged to even think about it. Um, Even if you're someone who's like, okay, I'm open-minded and I want to still practice, I want to do it, but if your circumstances are like that, you're discouraged from, let's say, practicing regularly, or practicing in a proper way where you can get the actual benefits. So culture, religion, and how that ties into um, the subcontinent, the population in the continent, um, or in sub-Saharan Africa, has a big role to play on on how or why meditation hasn't really expanded. Um, Another another reason might be, um, you know, just Africa in a whole, I guess, colonial, I my English is not like the best, so certain words I still struggle with. Colonialism, colonialism, uh, most nations are really relatively young, so there are other factors like literacy. The reason I say that, practicing meditation doesn't necessarily require a degree or anything, but for you to be able to access um, materials, even on the internet, internet is becoming more accessible, but still, if you have a higher illiteracy rate, um, it hinders you from, checking out books, reading them, understanding them to a certain level, seeking out certain information. It just your exposure is hindered, especially in our subcontinent where most of the yes, um, certain countries have adopted the colonial languages, so material can, to a certain extent, you have, um, your choices have been broadened. If you're a nation that speaks French, you can now access, you can understand, French, so you can understand French materials like writings and literature or talks or anything like that. So you have access to those things now. But like for example, in the context of Ethiopia, where we still or Ethiopia still uses its local dialect. Uh, People have to go to schools to learn languages like English, where you have more materials, you have more exposures to broader ideas than what is usually written by the native writers, and their writing is usually sort of constricted uh, by culture and by what sells. If you write a book about meditation, maybe it's not something that's popular that people would buy, so you're even discouraged, even if you have the desire to expand this and to write, like if you depending on your form of expression, even if you want to do a work with that, it might not be popular, so you're sort of discouraged. So it's harder to get materials. So literacy has a big role to play on that too. Um, okay, so now that is why I think meditation hasn't become popular in the context of sub-Saharan Africa. Now, how would it benefit if it does become, something that the local population, uh, you know, introduces to its daily life? How would that benefit the people? Like something like Vipassana meditation. How would it benefit Africa in its journey to becoming uh, economically independent and having a population that is not struggling for its daily necessities uh, or is prosperous. How would it help? The practice of meditation. It's meditation usually people do think of it as something, even in the West. It's thought about as something you use just to calm your mind, and that's about it. Um, and that's, at least from Vipassana meditation, that's totally not true. Yeah, I mean, it's a good benefit of meditation, and I'm sure it benefits people. Other traditions of meditation benefit people in that aspect. Calmer mind, helps people calm down when they're in certain situations and stuff. That's nice, but still, there is, an eventual, progress or an eventual point that you reach with the continued practice of, let's say Vipassana, for example, like I mentioned. Um, um, it's not necessarily just about calming your mind, or um, having, a peaceful mind. Uh, it also it also affects your daily actions. You conduct yourself in a very different manner. Um, your control with your on with what's happening on your body, or you understanding what's happening within your body, the context of your senses, um, greatly affects your actions, or your interactions with others, your involvement in your job, just your overall daily life. So, how would it benefit Africa? Mainly, if we had leaders that, let's say, if it was a requirement that they take, we have something called a 10-day like Vipassana retreat, like in the tradition of Vipassana. If that was a thing where they take that retreat, it's something that's already been given, like in the West, let's say, or in the East, they do it for like prisoners, and that has given a lot of benefits. But if, let's say, their leaders there were required to take a 10-day Vipassana, um, not necessarily that 10-day is like a medicine or a pill that that will, cure them of any abuse of power, but rather, with the hope, or with the assumption that they keep on practicing, um, that can really benefit. Because one problem that we have in the continent and where I'm from, also, is like not just leadership as in top leadership, but just in every sector of like government servants, or people who are supposed to serve the people, uh, or their communities, is corruption. So what's behind corruption? There's greed, right? When you think about um, taking a certain amount of money from um, let's say, a company, or from someone who just wants you to do the job that you were put in that place to do. You're not necessarily doing that person a favor that requires a payment, but you're already being paid by tax money and stuff. So it requires a certain level of greed for someone to want, some sort of bribe to do something. And there's greed, greed for more money. Yes, your nation will be struggling. Many people will be affected by the decisions you just made that are not logical, but rather based on your personal financial gains. But at the end of the day, you will be rich. So sort of like, who cares about the others? Um, so there is that sensation of, that desire, or that greed, right? That makes you want to take bribes, or that make a certain government corrupt. So how meditation, with being aware of your sensations, uh, I mean, with the practice, let's say Vipassana, it's not necessarily just you take on what we call, let's say, sila, which is morality, right? Morality as in like for example, during the courses you take precepts, that you won't steal, you won't tell lies, you won't kill, you won't drink, um, or you won't be intoxicated or drink alcohol or any intoxicating um, products, and that you won't be involved in sexual misconduct. And if you're what we call old student, you take on three more other precepts. But this already exists in our, society, in African society. Like in the religion I grew up in, you have the Ten Commandments, right? Christianity, you have the Ten Commandments that Christians should be abiding by. So if the person is taking a bribe, obviously they're breaking, probably multiple of those commandments, even though they might consider themselves Christian or anything like that. So the thing with meditation, yes, you have the theoretical aspect of what is best for this, for your meditation to help. You should live by a certain set of guidelines, but at the same time those guidelines have not necessarily helped. In human history we have a lot of rules in our societies, both religious or cultural, but people still, including myself, when I was a Christian, I lied and all those things. People still tend to break them. And why is that the case? So, with the meditation practice, that person, already knows, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't, accept bribes. But when the sense or um, when the, greed has a certain body sensation, right? I don't know if you've ever been aware of your greed. Like, let's say when you see, a certain type of food on the TV, uh, you want it, right? Like there's that feeling. Okay, I want that. Um, it will bring me so much happiness, right? If I eat it, oh, the satisfaction, how it would feel in my stomach, and just the taste and all those things. So money is in sort of that way, or whatever form of benefit that person is being corrupt by, it has that same effect when they think about that, right? Oh, if I get this car from this person, if I get this amount of money, I'll do this, I'll do that. Just the bodily sensations that would result in. So, one, that when that greed comes up, you will be better prepared. You'll be aware of it if you're someone who practices meditation. So when that awareness comes, you won't be inclined to react. You will have, that level of experiential understanding that this feeling is impermanent, whatever form of pleasure, let's say this greed is impermanent, but whatever form of pleasure I might get by taking this, whatever bribe, whatever it is, that too is also impermanent. So it's not just a intellectual understanding, but with observing your body during, meditation and following the guidelines, all of those things, it's something you come to and you understand. So you'll be less inclined to take government funding, to take bribes, to steal from the people. So that will significantly impact the whole continent, because that's one of the problems that is um, crippling our that part of the continent, or different parts of the world. We have that, and we have also in leadership aspects. We have leaders that don't want to let go of their leadership, that are oppressing their people, that are or even after being elected, they turn out to be, the same type of leader that the previous one that people maybe overthrew. They become that person again. So we do have a very, very serious issue with leadership, um, and just leaders caring about their people and listening to their people. So obviously, if those people like just the greed part, obviously more power, the desire for more power, longer power, is also a byproduct of greed. Uh, there is greed. There's this, desire for certain power over someone. There are feelings that are attached, let's say, you know, could be, even lust, right? Not, maybe not in this context. Even in this context, when you have a leadership role, um, you have power over people, right? You have power over anyone to get what you want from that person. So uh, leaders might not feel, that they want to give that up. Um, Even though it's, if it is impermanent, even though it's bound to come to an end, but there is that attachment that makes you still grip on, even if you're harming others, and even if you're just, causing more death and more suffering. um, but yeah, it will help with leadership, um, even in daily life. At the end of the day, the real change comes from, the down up, right? Not the from the top down. Your leaders come from you, from the daily society. So, granted that, people are able to achieve, um, to fulfill their daily needs, their physical needs. um, Meditation could really help bring more harmony among people, understand differences as just differences, because as we know, our subcontinent is very diverse and so different in many ways. Um, but at the end of the day, with meditation, there will be that understanding of those differences, seeing those differences as just differences, right? Uh, you having a different type of religion than me doesn't necessarily tell me anything else besides, let's say, you believe in a certain type of God, and that's it, right? It doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make you a good person, it doesn't make you a certain way. It doesn't mean that you hate me. It doesn't mean I should kill you. It doesn't, all those things. Uh, Meditation could help. Meditation obviously, when feelings like anger, jealousy, animosity, um, just those emotions that usually lead to fights, lead to seeking revenge on all those things, uh, you'll become aware of them, and the byproduct of you being aware of them and understanding. When you're aware of those sensations, you'll notice that they will arise and they're bound to go away. Your anger, you're gonna be angry, and after, if you're aware of it and if you're practiced properly, that anger will go away, depending on there isn't a set time, obviously, but it's impermanent, and you understand it as impermanent, so you don't necessarily feel the desire to, okay, I'm angry, I'm gonna go and hurt the person that made me angry. You understand that feeling as feeling, and you understand it as impermanent. So less casualties, less conflicts, less division. Yes, differences are okay. Division in a sense, though, let's keep each other's side, and let's not talk, let's not cooperate. That's considered division, and less of that and more communication, more understanding among each other. And when I say all those things, I'm not necessarily pointing at, oh, you're doing this wrong, wrong, wrong. I'm also part of the problem. I was part of the problem, and hopefully I want to become part of the solution. And um, you know it, it takes a lot of work, and it takes constant and persistent practice. So I'm not pointing fingers at others and necessarily saying you're the problem kind of thing. um, but yeah, it would help bring more peace, less conflicts and all those things. And even with wealth, people shouldn't be struggling to provide themselves with their daily necessities, or provide their kids um, with schooling or their needs, right? W- we all know we have the resources, obviously. There is what nature gave us, but obviously there's also this uh, wealth disparity. That we have the extremely rich that are in control of a lot of the industries and all those things, and there are a lot of the extremely poor. So again, with the greed and with, if meditation becomes part of everyone's daily life, where you have the wealthy that also come to understand that, okay, I have this much that is I don't necessarily need. I don't necessarily need 20 cars, 20 cars that cost me millions of dollars, when I live in a place, or when humanity is still struggling to provide itself with basic necessities like food. You know, if you're in a country where people are still struggling in food, like with food, it takes some sort of disconnect, for you to still be okay with, let's say, driving, just even driving the basic car. I'm not saying people shouldn't feel comfortable in places like that, but rather also being aware of that, understanding the desires that might lead to decisions like, okay, I'm gonna buy this car, but do I really need to buy this car? Can I put this money forward, let's say, to helping this family send their children to school, or this many families send their children to school and change generations of lives? Is it worth it? Is it worth me taking a public transportation? Wouldn't that be better than me spending this money on car and the added costs after that and stuff? But obviously it takes certain level of practice to come to that point where you have a level of compassion where you are selfless in that aspect. uh, have I personally reached that point? Not necessarily, not really. So when I speak, like I mentioned, when I talk about this, I'm sure people might say, why don't you do that? But it is a goal. Obviously it is something I want to be doing, um, and something I want to be aware of when I make certain purchases, and feel that I need, or I should get certain things for my happiness. But yeah, that would help in that aspect. Um, what other benefits? Oh yeah, so yes, the continent, the subcontinent is a growing one. Um, we I can, like, let's say in Ethiopia's case or other parts of Africa's case, the model that's being followed, as as a sort of a blueprint to reaching economic freedom, or where, like, let's say the West has is now, is the West, right? What they've done, we're sort of, I don't want to say copying, but it's sort of being imitated. We have the tall buildings, we have the industries. You're going to have similar social problems that come with that. Um so it's going to be a repeat of what has happened first, in Europe, and then America, and in the North Americans, and then at a certain point, parts of Asia. Um, and it will eventually, it's something that is destined to happen in Africa as well. So what model should we strive for? um, so I think with meditation we will be more aware of our impact, on our, on the places that on the place on the planet that we live in. um, I'm not in a place, or I don't think anyone should be in a place to tell any of the African countries, oh no, you shouldn't pick this industries, you shouldn't be doing what the West has done, because it's going to affect the environment more. Obviously, if you're doing it, if the West is doing it and it has given them this results, um, that particular part of the world shouldn't be in a place to tell other parts of the world, oh, you shouldn't do it, or anyone should be doing that. But if we're more aware of it, would we really want to repeat the same mistakes, or follow the same model? Um, if we're more in tune with what's around us and the life that is around us, and uh, the beings that we share this planet with, and the effects that our actions, or our buildings, or our industries have on not just other beings or an environment, but even us ourselves, with the culture and with the sense of community that we have come up with, historically, and how that would be affected by the model that is being followed as a sort of blueprint to growth and to prosperity. Um, so we might decide to do things differently, um, things that work with how the society is back home, and even make changes that are important to well-beings of individuals. Um, you know, I don't know, if you have a society that meditates, that where meditation is an integral part, not everyone necessarily has to do it, but um, if that's the case, you might not even need, police, a police department, let's say. You might not need, uh, amusement parks. You might not need, um, I don't know, 100,000, just buildings upon buildings of, uh, corporations. Your consumption will be very, very low to begin with. So because you understand that your happiness comes from within and not necessarily you going out to buy products upon products in stores that go back and harm your own community. Um, so less space occupied, we wouldn't even need that much space to expand and to impose upon nature. Less stores means way more less space. Less, more time for people to, like, to prioritize other things. Uh, yes, people will provide their necessities, what they need to live on. They will still work to provide themselves and their community with those things, and also build up on certain aspects like science or medicine that do help people come out of certain aspects of physical suffering that can be prevented, or that can be helped, right? It's not necessarily we're saying let's just go back to the Stone Age, um, and let's not care about science or anything like that. No, it's more, let's prioritize things and let's give ourselves more time to focus on those things that actually um, help human life prosper. Everyone's life prosper, not a specific group. Everyone's life prosper, and also just all life in general prosper. So focus on, there will be, I imagine there will be more focus on, certain aspects of science that will benefit human life and on this planet. Not necessarily, we're seeking some imaginative planet out there where we can conquer or anything necessarily, but just make this world a heaven for the people that are in it now, or the beings that are in it now. Um, so we'll have more time, right? More people will have more time. There will be less population. There will be the less desire to clone yourself. That's basically it, right? Like, you wanna, obviously there's this innate desire to pass on your genes, um, but at the same time, at least from the society that I came from, speaking from religious side, um, become marry, have kids and all those things, or wanting a certain type of gender child, to bring you a certain level of wealth, a certain level of status, that will become void, if you have a society that practices meditation. So um, less people in the world, because people would also be more aware of the impact of children that they have, and overall less desire of for sex, obviously. Not necessarily, not to discourage people from practicing meditation, because you're gonna not gonna have a sex drive or anything, but passion, just like any other emotion, or just like any other bodily sensation, you'll see it arise and you'll see it go away. So you don't necessarily feel the desire to go out and have sex with someone, because passion arises, or when you see someone, you see them as as what they are, which is flesh and bones, and a complex set of nervous systems and genes and all those things, and not necessarily a a beautiful man or a beautiful woman. Behind that skin, behind that body, there is this flesh, and even that skin, if you deprive it of food and if you deprive it of certain things, it will become undesirable, and it is impermanent. So there will be less lusting over human bodies. Uh, so the less sex, less human beings, less So because one of the things that is a problem, right? In um, subcontinent, the subcontinent of Africa, or even in Ethiopia, is population growth and uncontrolled, or uh, population growth that is not um, reflected with the economy, right? If you, it wouldn't have mattered if you had an economy that has a 1 trillion budget dollars budget a year, but at the same time, um, you don't have that economy, so it's just growth with more physical suffering because of lack of resources and lack of basic human needs. Um, so that would help in that aspect, I think. Um, maybe when people hear this, you might think, oh, this is just some ideal utopia, like a hippie commune kind of style kind of thing. Even communes, they have buildings, uh, they have sort of certain aspect of security, and there are people with a lot of different um, roles. I don't know, like I've never been a part of a commune, but um, with practicing meditation, I don't think communes necessarily practice meditation, like depending on the commune, obviously. But with meditation, I think you know, uh, there will be change, and it's very unrealistic to think. I'm sure that the whole subcontinent will start meditating. People, the billion people there, will all sit down to meditate and practice, and um, we will get the outcome, in an X amount of years. Even if, in a country like 1,000 people practice, 100,000 people practice, that has a big impact, and that can really shift certain things a certain way where it can benefit the rest of the society. If one person, if someone, let's say, if the Minister of Education was someone who practices meditation, that can really have an impact on decisions and just overall the country's situation. And so it doesn't necessarily take the whole population um, to bring, a noticeable change. Um, but at the same time, you have to have be that change needs to be organic, obviously, right? That change needs to come naturally. I've observed, or I've noticed, that you can't necessarily force anyone to meditate. You can tell people, oh yeah, I do this, but at the same time, you shouldn't be it wouldn't help if you said, oh, come with me and read this material, or me knocking at people's doors and have you heard about meditation, kind of thing. I came I was exposed to it naturally with my own research, because I was like probably the most unlikely person to think about meditation, right? My background, where I'm from, and like I mentioned, the taboo with outside practices. Uh, but still, I came to a point in my life, and I've talked about this in another video, which is in a different language. But at that point in my life, I found the benefits to really be uh, very significant. And you notice the changes in your daily life, and not necessarily an afterlife or anything like that, just in your daily interactions with people and with yourself. And does Africa need to reach a certain level of economic prosperity or economic independence to be able to have more people to practice? I'm sure that would help. It's something that is seen in other parts of the world, but not necessarily. Like, even speaking for myself, yes, it definitely helps to have your basic needs fulfilled, and I'm sure that's really important. Um, but not everyone can be the richest person in the world, where you can sit at that throne. You're the richest person in the world, and you just realize, oh my, okay, I'm still not happy. Um, you know, and then you start meditating. Not all, like, majority, 99.999999999 people would not get that opportunity, right? Um, or even just a basic wealth. We can't. Majority of us cannot be millionaires or have a certain financial freedom, which at the same time it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't naturally come to be attracted to meditation. It might just take, one 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 moments where you see that something you strived for didn't really didn't really give you the lasting happiness. You might be someone who wanted $100 and you got the $100, but you realized, okay, this hasn't really made me happy, and you set another goal and that still doesn't make you happy. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the richest person, the most comfortable person, the prince of princes, king of kings. Yes, the Buddha and the people that we know have been historically significant with their teaching and all those things. History tells us they come from those kingdoms. There were princes and all those things, but still lay people, or the people, the followers of those teachings, or people who do practice the most, or become monks and nuns. They don't necessarily need to be princes or some wealthy people to understand that um, things are impermanent around you. And people come to that realization in their own ways. Some people lose someone they love, and they look up something that might help them, and they find meditation, and they get exposed to meditation, and they realize that it will impact their entire life, not necessarily just to help them grieve or anything like that. So yeah, it should become natural, and I don't think the whole continent needs to be rich to come to that point. Um, but it will take a lot of work, I'm sure, uh, and with our society, but still the younger generation, I feel me being a part of it as well, um, are more exposed to other ideas, to other sets of beliefs, and other philosophies and other styles of lives, ways of living, and I think it might be easier, not easy. So um, it is definitely something that should be looked into, um, and it should accompany our desire to give the subcontinent, or the sub-Saharan Africa, the growth that we want it to reach. Should accompany, or should come along with our desire for the subcontinent to be independent and to be economically prosperous. That is my video, or the audio video kind of thing. Thank you for listening. Um, yes, I will see you in another topic. Thank you.